Good evening, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Rashmita, and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru, India. The session will run over the next 60 minutes, including Q&A. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Reactor YouTube channel. I will share the link to our YouTube channel in the chat section soon. Before we begin, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. Also, please keep your mics muted during the session. I would now like to welcome Jigar, our speaker for today's session. Jigar is a partner and senior solutions architect with Tech Scalable and has 16 plus years of experience. He has trained more than 25,000 IT professionals across the globe. He is also a Microsoft certified trainer. But for now, I will hand over to Jigar to begin the session. Over to you.
Thanks, Shashmita, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. I see many folks are joining still. First of all, thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule and attending this particular session. So let's get started. Let me share my screen and then we can get started with the agenda, what we are planning to cover up, and we'll understand how the entire solution or maybe having this the GitHub Actions to be utilized in terms of automating your CI/CD pipeline and deploying your resources in terms of Azure. So let's understand that. I'll disable my video for the moment because just wanted to focus on the session. So maybe just to avoid any distraction, I'll turn off my video and we'll enable at the end of the session. Yeah. So let me share my screen. So in this particular this particular you can say module, what we are planning to talk about. I hope you guys are able to see my screen, right? Okay. So maybe if you guys can mute yourself if not speaking. So here, what we are planning to talk about is more in terms of AKS deployment. With creating a particular pipeline in terms of automating your the code base, or maybe you can say nowadays there are many ways in terms of automating and deploying your resources on the AKS clusters, right? So we will be talking about those particular scenarios. So today we will be understanding that if I'm planning to go ahead with GitHub Actions to be build and deploy my particular solution, then what kind of option Microsoft is giving, what all the architectural view of that particular element. And if I'm planning to build my actions on top of it, if I want to configure any steps, what are the things I need to take care of it. So we will be understanding the flow of that, right? How you can create, what you can create, and like probably at the end of the day, if any cloud native applications, if I'm planning to build and deploy it, then what is the best way to go for it? Here you will be getting a particular Microsoft Learning module, or maybe you can say a Microsoft Learn path as well, to build and deploy your particular this entire pipeline with automating into the Azure. So first thing in place, at least you need a couple of elements to be understood when you are planning to go ahead with this entire learning, or maybe you can say implementation of that. So you need Azure subscription, because end of the day, the AKS and the CLI, basically, we will be using command line interface a lot, and the implementation of services, what we are expecting is something we need to work with Azure subscription. So because end of the day, you will be creating a couple of services which works on your overall environment. So you need Azure subscription in place. You need Git and GitHub account, so that basically we will be cloning couple of ready to use repositories available. So we can just plug and play in our solution and we can utilize them in terms of implementing that activity. We will be creating a few GitHub actions to automate the task. So basically, it will be helpful in terms of triggering the workflow and basically having those particular pipeline to be executed at the end of the day. And last but not least, maybe I'm assuming that if you do not have any Kubernetes background, then I'll be sharing one more URL as well during this particular session in chat. That's a very nice zero to hero with Kubernetes learning path provided in terms of Microsoft Learning Path. So here is the link where you can simply like go ahead and understand that how this particular component looks like. So this zero to hero learning path is offering you around 50 days learning of Kubernetes because end of the day, the expectation is that you should have some background of Kubernetes because without that, it will be a bit challenging to automate your task and provision resources and all that stuff, right? So ultimately, you have to have some particular background with that. So end of the day, you will be able to create and automate those activity with the help of it. So if you are going ahead with this self-learning module, that 50 days learning path, then you will have a couple of, you can say Kubernetes explanations, some self-learning videos and some nice storytelling. So for example, Fippy in the Zoop. So basically it explained the Kubernetes concepts well in advance, or probably at least you will reach from beginners to intermediate level at least. So it will give you some nice explanations and storytelling out of it. So maybe if you guys new to this, maybe this is something a nice learning path for you as well. And along with this, basically you need to have access with MS Learn module, right? So Microsoft Learn, where you will be implementing this particular entire AKS deployment with creating GitHub uh, actions, and you can deploy it as a pipeline on top of it. So these are some core thing which you need during this particular learning journey. Of course, in this entire module, there are two different way it was showing that how you can build and deploy your solutions on top of the AKS. So one is with GitHub Action, second is showed with Helm chart as well. So Helm chart is also, again, it's an open source component which allows you to build and deploy your solutions on top of it. So ultimate goal over here is to provide you a kind of insight regarding uh, deployment of your particular AKS component with these kind of services, right? So ultimately, we need to plan it out that particular automation activity and have your services to be up and running with the help of this particular flow. So let's get started. So first of all, I'll be talking about the architecture of, you can say, this particular entire GitHub Actions and all, what all the things we are going to create and how this is going to be implemented. So we will be talking about that particular task first of all. And once that particular concept is clear, then we will be able to go ahead and plan the variety of, implementation part of it. Yeah. So first of all, I'll explain the how this entire GitHub Actions you can use it and you can create a automated pipeline. Yep. So we will talk about those architectural component and then detail insight about GitHub Action steps, that what all the steps we are going to include and how that is something going to be automated in that particular deployment activity and all. Yeah. So basically this entire you can say architecture divides into a couple of sections, maybe around 3 to 4 sections I can divide it. And then I'll try to explain with some boxes and like explanation of those areas. So it will be easy for all of you to understand. So in this overall GitHub action, what we are planning to cover up, what all the components are available, right? So in general, I mean, if I wanted to like talk about this entire workflow, then here I will say, let's give a title, AKS deployment using GitHub Action. Okay, so this is basically our complete workflow, or maybe you can say the architectural explanation we will be going through with it. Now let's consider the business use case. Okay, traditionally, what is happening when enterprises are planning to move it into Kubernetes and all, so they solution to be up and with Kubernetes clusters and all that. So they identify valid environment to be set up, and they start deploying their particular environment with the respective component. Now, the problem statement over here with this at to automate these particular activity, because majorly when you get a particular resources to be deployed and automate with environment so created from scratch, you need a particular services to be deployed into the environment. You need to create a Docker image in between. You need to push that image into container registry, and from there you need to execute the overall workflow into the task, right? So here, the first of all, the option is more about it's more about how that entire solution we wanted to take care of it, right? So if I begin this particular workflow, so let's assume that I'll be having a particular developer who is working on this particular platform, right? So you may have a particular guy who is working on this particular entire solution. So you can consider that being a developer, your roles and responsibility is to basically check in code into your source control, and from that source control you need to trigger this particular actions in a step-by-step workflow. So this will be your first step, where you can consider that overall deployment process. What I'm expecting is something, maybe I can say I'll have my GitHub in place. Right, so you will be basically defining, let's say you may have a GitHub in place, and you can basically like have certain kind of deployment scenario to be taken care behind the scene, right? So I can consider that the overall hosting part of it, right? So you may have some GitHub activity, right? So this will be your particular source control. Here, being a developer, you will be checking your code. So this will be my initial step, where being a solution developer, I'll be pushing my application code into the system and making sure that it will be giving me certain type of business use case or activity to be taken care in terms of automating this scenario, right? So this will be your step number one, and then you can build and push your particular application code. So in this, from the enterprise point of view, what all the activity you will be doing it, right? So initially you will require definitely a GitHub account to be created. You need a particular repository to be cloned, or maybe you create it from scratch. And of course, I mean, you need to authorize with your valid credentials and other activities you will be going through in terms of pushing your application code to build the image via using this particular source control, right? So initially, the role of your particular source control is to provide you a kind of execution where it will allow you to automate your code push into the system. Now, once the solution when you are going ahead with that particular activity. Once you have your particular element to be up and running, that second step, maybe I can say this, once the first step going to be over, when you push your particular application code into the system and all, the second step is to trigger your particular GitHub action, because end of the day, once your application source code is pushed into the system, you need to trigger your particular GitHub action. So to build your GitHub action, you will be triggering a particular workflow inside that, right? So to design that particular workflow, what all the steps you will be following inside that, what all the activity you will be doing, so that your GitHub workflow will get created, and whatever the elementary actions we need to take it inside that, we will be able to do it. So first of all, you may have your particular actions to be created, right? Inside that particular actions, you will be defining some sort of steps to be created, that what all the activity you are planning to execute. There are some particular branches you will be coming up with it, and you can have some particular activities to be triggered with the help of it. So you will be planning your GitHub action. So what is GitHub Actions? Maybe if you are not familiar, then at least I'll just give you some background regarding that. Right. So this is basically it's more about automating certain kind of workflow, or maybe you can say a kind of a smart way to create your workflow, and maybe you can automate your deployment processes with it, right? So the purpose of GitHub Actions to provide you, maybe you can say, currently what is the build release pipeline what we are expecting. So in this, the GitHub Actions allow me to create, build and deploy my particular sequence in this entire workflow, and I can push my deployment with the help of it. So automation, or maybe you can say a kind of creating smart automated CI/CD pipeline, customized pipeline on top of it. That is something what you can get it. The advantage over here, what we see is that it is built in into GitHub. You have a lot of predefined connectors available. So if in case you are planning to bring, let's say, Docker or any other particular component in place, so it will be giving you a kind of options to be triggered. So for example, what I have done, I have used my particular GitHub account where I have created my sample, what do you say, the pipeline, and this particular pipeline is allowing me to execute the job what I am looking for. So in general, we will have access to our code repository, which is something I have forked and cloned that particular code repository in my environment. So while following this MS Learn document, definitely you will be going through with this couple of activity. But yeah, as I said, that some background knowledge required. So you should have some background with Kubernetes or bash commands and all that. So it will be easy for you to work with this activity. Now, the actions, what I'm talking about. So in my activity, there are some predefined actions what I have defined with my GitHub repo, which allows me to automate my activity. So in this, basically, there are some configurations like I have given. I have created my YAML file, and inside that YAML file, I have put up my particular steps and workflow, that what is expected during this entire workflow. So I should be able to connect and access my Docker container. I should be able to push my image and kind of activities I can perform. So within particular actions, the GitHub actions, you have some built-in particular marketplace option available. Say, for example, here in our activity, we need a particular Docker to be connected, right? So I need a particular Docker login base activity. So in my entire workflow, and if you click on any of certain marketplace driven activity, so there are some particular two options available. So maybe the documentation and explanation of this particular connectors, and at the same time you will get some particular sample code also, that what you can replicate with some command instructions and everything. So it's like fully explained kind of like use case of so and so activity. So here, basically, if I'm planning to bring this particular Docker login activity during my particular workflow or in my particular automation, then I need to integrate that particular credentials into my system, and then I can trigger my workflow out of the box. So here, what I have done that basically created my GitHub workflow with it. And inside that workflow, I am basically pushing my Docker image into the container registry and all, because end of the day, whatever the code is going to be built, it has to automate my Docker push command, pushing my particular image into my container registry. And from container registry, I should be able to pick up that particular environment and deploy it into my particular AKS solutions and all that, right? So here, basically the objective is that to give you a kind of standard operation to be followed, giving you a kind of like step-by-step activity where you will get this particular automation to be done. So my second step will be, you can say, it will allow me to provision my particular GitHub trigger my action workflow, and I will be able to push my particular code for container registry. And also this will be my particular second step, that whatever the trigger we wanted to execute it is something you will be planning over here. So my second step, as soon as my code get pushed into my environment, I need to execute or I need to trigger my particular actions. So inside that actions, as I mentioned that there will be some steps given. So these steps are basically allowing me to plan and deploy my particular container images, because end of the day, whatever the application code we have, we should have that particular code to be pushed, converted as a Docker image, and then it has to be pushed into my container registry somewhere. And then I'll be able to deploy my particular environment with that, right? So here I'll be able to like automate my deployment with container registry. So my next step will be my container registry over here. So in this, I can consider that if in case any here you can have a multiple options for creating and working with container registry, right? So maybe I can use Docker Container Registry or Azure ACR, the Azure Container Registry, whatever you wanted. But in general, it will be a container registry where it will allow you to push your, you can say, the application code as an container image, and that's where you have this particular activity to be followed, right? So here I can say I may have my container registry in place. Right, so I will be defining my containers. So the role of this particular container is to provide you a kind of environment where you can simply say that any deployment, any particular process, what we are expecting, it is going inside my particular container environment, and it will allow me to create my images on top of it. So here I will say that whatever the actions I will be creating, so the role of that particular action is to provide me a particular automation of the workflow, which help me to push my containers. Containers, basically it's an image, container image, to my environment. So in this case, we wanted that this particular exercise will be creating my Docker images in place, and whatever the container images are expected into the system is something created during this particular exercise. So it will allow me to create my Docker images with some particular latest and greatest tags to be attached to it, and then it will go to my particular container image. So this will be your particular Docker container image, which you're gonna create and execute back of the system, and that will be your you can say third step, which allows you to execute and implement your particular overall activity to push your container image inside your container registry. So this will be your third step, what you can consider. So in this particular exercise, there are steps given. As I explained that in my particular GitHub action, I will be pushing. So here, I mean, I'm giving some generic instruction that build and push the latest build to my staging or production or whatever the environment I have. So I can simply create. So right now I have created my staging YAML. Okay. Similarly, I can create my main YAML, and inside that particular YAML execution, I will have my particular instructions to build and host my particular overall activity. So I have given name to my pipeline, what actions and executions I'm planning to go ahead with it. Here I will be defining that on push of my particular code, or when you submit or when you commit your particular code, it has to go into my main branch under the staging.yaml. And there are some jobs to run, which allows me to create my particular container image. And then it is supposed to build and push into my Docker container. So with version 1 or whatever the versioning you are looking at it, so it will get pushed into that particular system. So ultimately, the role of this particular activity is to publish my particular container image into respective container registry. Now, what I did, I have created a couple of elements in Azure. Okay, so those elements are there are two particular services what we need. One is we need a particular AKS. So this will be a kind of service where I'm going to host this entire AKS environment. And second is my particular container registry. So in this particular ACR, we will have our particular images to be created. We can have our repositories, and inside that, we will be pushing our particular images on top of it. So right now, I mean, I have created one Contoso website as in repo, and inside that, my latest image has been pushed into the system, which has some particular like manifest file, and it will show me some particular conversion at the end of the day. So execution is that I'm expecting this particular instance to be pushed and executed as in container inside the container registry. And for that, I have created and configured some of the steps. Okay. So these steps are going to perform, or maybe you can say it will retrieve my container registry name, the login credential, and the required password to connect and access this particular container registry. So this will allow me to push my new container image inside that. So whatever the steps we have built over here, right? So these are the particular component, whatever the steps we have identified. So these steps are going to helpful in terms of allowing me in terms of connecting and executing the particular task over here, right? So this is my particular container. I mean, whatever the jobs or whatever the task I'm expecting inside this is something given over here. So you need to figure it out that what is the what all the jobs you wanted to plan and execute inside that. So here I will have my particular jobs to be created and pushed my activity inside that. So those tasks are written with my GitHub Actions, right? That what all the steps I need to configure and all. Now, when you are doing it, there are a couple of elements you need to take care of it. So of course, I mean, uh, this ACR, or you can say the login or the password, whatever we need to get it, is something coming from my container registry, right? So which is something which you have created initially as an resource. So while following this particular MS Learn steps, you will get that idea that you need to execute some particular repository first, and then you will be triggering some init.sh file, which provision your services, right? Your ACR, your AKS, and your desired component, what you are expecting to be executed in this entire architecture. So once that is ready, the next step is to basically go ahead and create your particular GitHub Actions, which allows you to build and push the image into your ACI. Now to do this, definitely you need to set some environment variable. Okay, so during this particular repository of your staging environment, maybe we need to go to the settings and maybe slight UI update. Maybe when you are following this MS Learn document, so if you are not finding these secrets, and there is one instruction given that directly create new secrets and all. So if you don't find that button, there is slight UI enhancement in this GitHub. So you need to go to under settings. Here is the secrets, and inside that secrets you have actions. So if you click on actions, there you have new repository secrets to be created and all. Whereas in instruction it was written create new secret directly, right? So don't get confused in that case. Now when you create the new repository secret, so right now I have my secrets created. So one is basically the login point of view. So what username I'm planning to opt for, the ACR name under which I wanted to build and push my latest image of it, and the ACR password, which is something embedded into my particular code. Now these are my secure field. So if you are either you can update or you can remove. So if you say update, it will not show you the old value, right? You need to put up a new value and then only you will be able to update. So once this is fixed, you will not be able to see your like get the access to those particular value which you have written inside that. Either you update again and then you reapply the value and then you will be getting access to it. So this way at least it will be a secure credentials, you will be putting it inside the system. Okay. Now once this is done, this particular configurations basically allow you to build your Docker image and push it into the system. Okay, so when you run this particular flow, so initially when I was doing it, it was failing because it was not taking some credentials. I mean, wrong credentials I gave maybe by mistake. But here, if you see now, the YAML file got created. You will see all the actions which you have created, right? So you have set up the job, you have run the actions to check out your code, you have set up the build environment, you have logged into your particular Docker, right? So it will show you all the step-by-step workflow, which is something required to execute your activity, right? So for example, it is something applicable to push my Docker image into my ACR. So it will show you the steps of activity processed at the backend, right? So here you will see the long list of the steps and process, but when it is getting executed, it is like pretty much faster and push the Docker image inside the container registry. Then you have build and push the staging images, because end of the day we wanted to push this image into stage environment, and on top of that whatever the post login, it should be log out and all the activities will get executed, and at the end you will have a complete job. So ultimate goal over here is to provide you a sequential activity to be triggered, and basically it will allow you to push your particular build workflow to create your Docker images, and those images with tag. Okay, this particular Docker images are coming up with tags. So right now, the way I have pushed, that will be a particular latest tag attached to my particular service, and it is getting pushed into my container registry. And from the latest tag, whatever the container registry is there, this is something getting stored into it with the latest update. And now, uh, so this is my third step. Last but not least is something I need to push this particular deployment into my AKS cluster, right? So the fourth step is basically to push your particular container image into the AKS, right? So maybe you can say there will be some sort of AKS environment you might be having. Right, so this will be like a kind of complete microservice architecture driven options. If you are looking at it and you just wanted to push any particular component inside that, then you can have some sort of activity to be followed. So in general, you may have your particular AKS cluster to be created. So maybe you can identify the number of nodes you wanted to create inside that. and at the end of the day, it will allow you to execute the services on top of it. So the fourth step, what you can consider in terms of automation, in terms of putting your particular environment, the fourth step will be the deployment of your particular container image into the system. Right, so that's your particular fourth step, and you can simply execute that. Okay, whatever the environment got created, I just need to like deploy it. So this is basically allow you to execute your particular GitHub actions, and you can build and push your particular activity. So if you consider this is your a high level architecture where you can say that if in case any GitHub actions you are planning to execute and you wanted to have your services to be executed throughout this cycle, then this is something what you can think through, right? This is something what you can implement and execute the overall task. Now, if I want to break up this particular task like pipeline designing, because end of the day, the main activity if I want to consider is my pipeline creation, right? Because end of the day, whatever the activity going to be focused is something focused with my pipeline creation. Because end of the day, if pipeline is not perfectly up and running, then you will not have your particular work, the environment creation or implementation of this particular activity. So we need to make sure that our pipeline should be strong enough and you can have some better activity to be executed, right? So if I want to explain this particular component, the pipeline part of it, uh, pipeline maybe we can divide into three phases, what you can consider. One is your, you can say trigger phase. Right, so that will be like initial phase where you will be creating your particular trigger at the execution point of view. Second will be your build phase or build step, and then third will be your deployment one, right? So here you can say the second environment will be my build activity, uh, build, and third one is your particular deployment steps into this. So whenever we have this particular execution to be get going, so under trigger, what we can consider that if I'm planning to execute my GitHub action workflow, then here I can say you may create a particular trigger with some specific tags and particular initial activity what you are expecting to be executed. So maybe I can say I may have, you can consider that some particular pipeline to be created. And maybe in this particular pipeline, I'll be having some particular standard actions to be created, right? So as I said, like right now, initially when I created, it was more with staging kind of thing. Or maybe if I'm planning to create it, maybe a tag to be associated to my repository while creating this action and all, I'll be going ahead with my particular production one and all. So here, if I want to consider, maybe I can put it this way. So here I will say in my first execution, I will consider that tag to be created. Tag push to main, right? So you need to create a tag, which is something allowing you to trigger your particular workflow and you can push it to your main repo. And at the same time, here, this will be, maybe you can say it's for testing point of view, here you can say you will have a normal push to main. Right, so this is something giving you a kind of a testing kind of activity. So once my particular push or once I get the trigger, so the next step will be executing your particular build processes. right? So in this particular build process, you can consider that you will have a clone repo to be created, correct? So clone repo is something your existing particular directory or maybe your Git repo, whatever you have, you will be going ahead with that particular clone repository to be created. So in your process, maybe you can consider there will be a three element I will be considering if it is the same uh, options if we are carry forwarding, right? So here I will say, let me have the workflow to be created. So it will be easy for everybody to understand. And last but not least, it will be a deploy. So we can have a overall explanation that what needs to be taken care inside that. So here, the execution point of view, I will be going through with couple of elements. So here I will say my clone repo, because initially when you are planning to push any image with tag or without tag, so here you need to clone your repo. Yeah, so it will be same particular applicable to this. You will clone your particular repo. Once the repo gets cloned, you will be building your particular image. So here you will say like probably build image with a tag, right? And this one will be build image with latest tag. So this will be basically giving you a kind of execution and workflow to be get going inside that. And both of them are going to be pushed inside your ACR at the end of the day, because this is what the actions what I have defined. And once that is pushed into ACR, it will goes to your particular deployment steps where you can say deploy to production, and here you can say deploy to stage. So in general, basically your entire workflow, your entire activity, what we are planning to execute in this particular activity is going to follow your the section wise that initially you will be triggering your particular workflow. Inside the build, you may have some particular actions to be taken care that what kind of activity you wanted to follow, and inside your particular deploy, I mean whatever the steps you wanted to do, like clone your repo, build the image, push it to the ACR, and from there it is going to your productionized environment or non-production environment like staging and dev and whatever you wanted. So ultimate goal over here is to provide you a kind of well-defined actions to be created, execution of your particular actions. You can create and set up your particular projects out of the box. Now, just for this particular exercise, what I did, I have created this particular action in place. Okay. This is something like I have created in terms of execution, and I have run this particular action also on top of it. So whatever the steps I have explained, those steps are as I mentioned that it is something created with my particular execution. So if in case any activity which we need to go ahead and plan, then I can have that specific access to this code repo to be get going, right? So we have a particular workflow to be created, and inside that we can have inside this particular YAML file, we have the execution, or maybe you can say the task, which is something to be edited or updated inside that actions. And once these particular actions and activity are in place, uh, uh, need to deploy that particular thing. So initially I have created my what do you say? I have created my environment, right? So Docker build and other stuff I have did it, and I do have my activities in place, and it is the image which was required, right? So as I showed that it's something like build and post into the environment, so it is something triggering my latest image to be get going inside the system. So ultimately we need to figure it out that what kind of actions we are planning to work with it, how the automation activity you want to do it, and probably you can have this entire workflow to be executed, right? So it's more about like creating your tags, attaching it to your particular images, creating your container image, and have the execution or maybe the entire workflow to be created, right? So the core concept is to design your particular pipeline, because uh, if you wanted that automated activity to be followed, then your pipeline should be well defined, and you can execute the container image to build and host your particular AKS cluster, and you can have your particular production environment to be up and running. Now, when you guys are following up with this particular activity, okay, when you guys are going ahead with this particular step, so there are two sections of it. One is basically you will be creating a staging environment. So initially you will be creating your project, you will be cloning your repos, and you will be creating a particular container image with the staging environment. And at the same time, later you will be creating the same thing with the production one as well, right? So so far the architecture which I have talked about, right? This is something going into either staging or either production. So staging one you will be creating, and later stage there is an option where you will be pushing this particular actions for your production environment as well. So you need to create two different YAML file. One is for staging, one is for particular production, and then you will be automating the same exercise with pushing this particular build repo and into ACR, and then from there it will goes ahead to the setup of your particular environment. So ultimately, it's a kind of step-by-step approach you will be going through with it. Your Contoso website, the application which is something available, it is something you will be pushing it into the Azure, and your YAML file allows you to build and deploy that environment into AKS. Okay, so this exercise basically focus on these two area. One is basically creating your environment with GitHub Action. So our core focus of this today's session is more on the GitHub Action, that it will allow you to automate these particular step-by-step activity, and you can have certain kind of deployment to be taken care into the design consideration what we have, right? So this is something a kind of, you can say, a high-end understanding of how the overall environment looks like, the architectural component of entire GitHub action based deployment, and at the same time how the pipeline looks like, what kind of actions you will be following up inside this trigger is something I have explained, right? And during this exercise, maybe when you guys are going ahead, as I said, that couple of elements may you see a little bit difference in the instructions, but in UI maybe UI got a little bit updated, so you might see some changes here and there. But yeah, I mean, those things can be easily make it out. Yeah. So any queries, questions so far? I'll be sharing this Kubernetes links also, as I said. So during this particular exercise, I would like to share that Kubernetes links as well for Zero to Hero with Kubernetes. So people who all are planning to learn, or you just wanted to go through with this, maybe you can take a look at it, because end of the day, this is something going to give you a kind of better learning understanding of AKS and all. Yeah, I think there was one hand raise. Who has a question? Afzal Atik. Yeah, Afzal. Any questions you have? Manish Parik. Yeah, Manish.
Hi, Jigar, am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Jigar. It was very informative. So, couple
Mhm.
of things, like if you mentioned that this actions can be replaced with Helm chart, right? If I understood correctly.
Correct. I mean, there are multiple way to do it. So Kubernetes, I mean, also offer a kind of option where you can say building and deploying your YAML file with the Helm, and you can automate or trigger the actions with that as well. So it can be done. I mean, you need to push your image and all that. So you can use Helm chart as well.
So, in case we are using Helm charts, which
Mhm.
components will not be required? Like you had done a good drawing. So, I'm sorry I don't have that drawing now, but yeah, if you
No problem.
yeah, yeah. So if you can just say that, okay, in that case, what will be replaced? So we don't need a help chart. So that was something will be helpful.
Uh, okay. So let me put it this way. So it will be a combination of both rather than replacement. So in that case, what you can do is that, yeah, you can do this way that I can create my particular job still inside the, because Helm chart going to allow you to create your artifacts and all, whatever the Docker build image and other actions and other activity, what we are expecting. Those couple of YAML creation and all that will be available with the Helm chart. So
Hmm.
in that case, you will be using Helm configuration, and the steps what we have done, still we can use GitHub Actions where we can push our particular activity. We can connect to our ACR, build the image, push it into the same environment, and instead of you have a Helm installer directly available, so that Helm installer is going to allow you in terms of configuring your AKS image and all, because end of the day I wanted to deploy my AKS cluster with the latest image, right? So then in
Right.
that case, Helm chart going to help you in terms of pushing that particular image into it. So yeah, I mean, my mistake. I mean, it was not replacement, but it will be a combination of both. You will have that deployment to be done with your AKS. So your artifacts of AKS going to be taken care by Helm. Your workflow for creating your container image and other stuff, that will be taken care by the GitHub Actions.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks a lot. And second question was about if we are having the AKS cluster, and you
Mhm.
mentioned we can select the images from the registry. So can I
Correct.
have different type of images rather than a
Yeah, yeah,
single image in the same cluster?
yeah. So it is a. I mean, if in case, so you can consider that in your AKS cluster, you can imagine that you have a 2 node or 3 node, whatever cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in one node, you may have particular one container image is up and running, or maybe let's assume that you have an e-commerce portal, and
Correct.
maybe front end is running in one container. My middle tier for admin panel, probably I can say running in second node, and third node maybe some other configuration. Now,
Correct.
only thing is that you need to take care of the routing of your traffic at the initial. I mean, how your, let's say if I'm requesting for admin panel, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you need to take it those activity at your load balancing or your Nginx level, so that how your user will reach to that specific endpoint. So
Perfect.
there is no harm as such, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is advisable if it is smaller solution, then it's fine. But if you go ahead with enterprise one, then it is always advisable that you keep it separate cluster, because scalability point of view and
Mm-hmm.
manageability point of view, it will become easy. So
Okay.
that way you will not make it more complex environment, and you can distribute your component from the microservice point of view, and you can easily manage them. So that is something you can do it. Yeah.
So we can do it, but it's not advisable. That's what we here, right?
Yeah. I mean, if it's an enterprise one, then definitely, I mean, you should keep it separate, so it will become easy for you then.
Perfect. Though I have a couple of more questions, but maybe if somebody else wants to ask something, let
Sure.
him or her
Yeah.
ask. Otherwise, I'll continue. Yeah. So I'll just mute
Thank.
myself and wait for a couple
Yeah.
of minutes. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else has any questions? Please feel free to go ahead.
Hi, Jigar.
Yeah, hi.
Here. Is
Yes,
it better to be use private endpoint in the ACR?
private endpoint in ACR to pull the image and push it into AKS?
Yeah, or
Uh,
it will be pull it in the ACR rather than keep it in the public endpoint.
correct. So see, I mean, there are two possibilities. So one of the use case I would like to highlight over here. So I was working on one of the activity where the expectation was the organization level. They don't want any particular developer or any particular testing team or even external people who are contributing in this project development. They don't want anybody to connect over the public endpoint. So definitely, I mean, whatever the resources are from the backend, from the security point of view, or probably you can say more enterprise environment point of view, they went ahead with complete access of these services over the private link or private endpoint. So that way, at least maybe you have your particular private repos stored inside that. It will be accessible within the environment itself, and probably it can be consumed within your development activity what you are looking at it. So yeah, it is advisable if you have a specific business use case, and if that is the requirement from the enterprise point of view, then definitely, I mean, it's advisable. That's nothing wrong in that particularly. But yeah, if
Okay.
a lot of enterprise do this way also, like they create some images and within organization itself, or probably they wanted to give it away those particular repo to external worlds as well, then probably they make it public, but it's like very rare.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it's a best practice, maybe you can say.
got it. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, anyone else, any other questions?
Yeah, hi Jigar. Good evening. I have two
Yeah, hi.
questions in this workflow which you mentioned, the automation, the workflow for this GitHub Actions. So if we
Mhm.
wanted to need pass a manual parameter, if we wanted to do a selection of a parameter for creating my build, is it possible? And that was my first question. And second question is, say if the build got failed or it got failed or it is taking time. So how could I troubleshoot or how could I create the build again?
Correct. So here is your answer. I mean, this is exactly what happened with my build as well. So when I was initially configuring, so you can keep a track of it when you are running such particular build. So you can go inside the build and you can visualize that what was wrong inside this. So initially when I created, my build got failed because of my credential was not right, and it will show you during that execution itself that which particular step it got failed. So maybe in my entire action there are like 10 steps and my build is getting failed at fifth step. So you can go inside that actions and you can monitor that at which particular step it is failing, and it will show you the cause of error as well, that because of what it is getting fail or something. So in my case, it was Docker credential or the container image credential which I gave that was like wrong, or maybe it was some white space added. So it was failing in that particular case. So managing those particular activity is something seamless. You can simply go to the portal itself, and from the user interface, you have all the possible options to track it. Okay. Now, the point of adding variables, right? So for example, uh, it's not exactly the variable, but right now I'm trying to show you that within my action, I wanted to add my couple of elements, my credentials, which is something like manually added in this entire workflow, because it will uh, go to my ACR, authenticate my ACR, and open a connection where I can push my particular container image inside that. So unless and until you do not provide valid credential, it will not allow you to perform that activity, right? So you have an option where you can simply go ahead and add your particular environment variable or any other particular activity which you are looking at it. So related to actions, you can have those kind of configurations available. So any such activity you want to perform, I think you can do it over here. I think that is what your question, right?
Yeah, yes, yes.
So basically it will allow you, I mean, all the possible options are there. We just need to have that specific configurations to be part of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and drawing, maybe if you guys want, I'm not sure if I able to upload somewhere, but if you want and take a screenshot of this, maybe that will be really great. And if you want, I can just switch to the right side of this trigger, build and deploy also. Maybe you can have a screenshot of this as well. So, and by the way, this will be available as in recording as well. So you guys can view this particular recording again over the YouTube. So under the reactor channel. And please make sure that when you guys are following this particular Microsoft Learn steps, log in with the portal, sign in with the portal so that you can redeem this particular number of XPs and maybe some badges and other stuff you can receive as a default badge from this particular MS Learn activity as well. So just log in and then try to activate. So you will be able to execute the entire workflow in a step-by-step activity. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Manish again. So
Yeah,
with
Manish.
respect to you mentioned about routing, yeah. So there are certain things like when, as you mentioned, that in case of enterprise level applications which are very large, we have in that case multiple like containers kind of, yeah. So assuming Kubernetes can definitely take care of that. But if suppose on one node we are running some say application layer example, okay,
Okay.
and as part of my HA or DR, I probably will also like to run it on my other node as well, okay, which is may not be on the same probably I can say availability zone or something, but it might be somewhere away, so that it
Okay.
in case of DR, I mean it will be helpful, yeah. So such kind of
Correct.
things will be required as a design. But now this also brings out the network layer level complexities as well, because as we grow, I mean, it spans out or it scales out, it will need more proper connection or integration, right? So such kind of things, are there any good practices or some documents which can
Correct.
help us to do this? So is there
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
which come on? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So in this can say if you want, I'll redirect you to Azure Architecture Center for AKS. So in this, when you are planning to go ahead and build any solution on top of the, so exactly the question which you asked, right? How you can provide your ingress routing to your particular clusters, or if you're planning to build and deploy this particular solution across the particular region and all. So what kind of component you can bring it into place. So here basically architecture center is there where certain kind of explanation is given, and probably it stress on how you're going to build enterprise grade microservice architecture. So some nice guideline also given and some architectural explanation also given from the component point of view. So I can recommend that you should take a look at it, this part as well. Yep. So I'm sharing this link in chat.
Yeah, looks good. Very good. Yeah, thanks a
Yep.
lot. This is helpful.
Because this will give, yeah, this is give you a lot of insight, because when you pick and choose individual component, I mean, you need to choose very carefully, because backend you have database, you have Active Directory and many more services. So it's not just only AKS. So when you build certain things, then how are you going to follow those activities? So probably it's a nice documentation in that case.
It's a
Yep.
reference architecture, I suppose, yeah, which can
Yes,
be.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, thanks
Absolutely.
a lot. Makes sense.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, if no questions, then over to you, Rashmita. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Jigar. We'll just give it another minute, and if there are any last minute questions. The session will
And
be uploaded. The session will be uploaded on our Reactor YouTube channel within 24 to 48 hours. I've already shared the link to our YouTube channel in the chat section. I will also share the recorded link on the meetup page once it is uploaded. You can come back to the meetup page and you can refer. And I'm sure, when I post, probably all the participants will get a notification. So it would be easy for you that, you'll know that the session is already uploaded and you can refer back to the session. Okay. Looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you so much, Jigar, for the session, and thank you all for joining us today. Please do share your feedback about today's session. Also, please feel free to use the Learn module link shared in the chat section. This will give you access to additional resources to take your learning further. Also, please visit our Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru meetup page for more upcoming session. Thank you all once again and enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.